Morning, everyone. My name is Dr. Richard Pettigrew. I'm from IEC Infrared Systems. We're going to talk to you today about keeping the pace of new technology. So we have our panel joining us up here. And I will defer to each of them to introduce themselves. So Kevin, why don't we start with you on introduction?
Check, check. Excellent. Hi, my name's Kevin Gambold. I'm an ex-Royal Air Force pilot. Did an exchange tour with USAF flying Predators and retired to a great country and just became a citizen. So happy to be here. Legal, I hasten to add. Do you want to go around the team?
Sure, let's go.
All right, all yours.
All right, so I don't know if you can hear me. Oh, okay. Hi, good morning. My name is Eleanor Mitch. I'm CEO and co-founder of 14B Supply Tracking, which is right over there. And we are a company that leverages blockchain technology for aerospace and defense supply chains, tracking digital and physical assets.
I'm John Halsema. I'm the Chief Technology Officer and Chief Operating Officer at Ares Security. We do modeling and simulation and situational awareness systems. My background is I'm a retired U.S. naval officer. I'm a submarine skipper. Worked a lot with the U.S. Air Force in my last job in the Pentagon, which was modeling and simulation. So now I'm at a modeling and simulation company.
Cool. Hi, I'm Jackie Mork. I'm CEO of Input Strategic Partners, and we do blockchain technology development, smart contracts, and ICO launches.
All right, great. With those introductions, we'll start off with a question for Kevin. Kevin, what new technologies do you see coming that'll have the biggest impact on security, and that could be either physical or cyber, for fixed, mobile, and temporary sites?
Okay, so I'm a bit of a pessimist come realist, and I think the DoD as a whole is long overdue for a tactical surprise. And anybody that was tracking what happened in Niger last year, that becomes a strategic surprise almost immediately. We're looking at forward operating base security in particular here, and we, through our convoluted procurement process, are getting behind the opposition. We will have probably what will look like a non-state actor provide incredibly high-tech, swarming, crawling robotics through the HESCO barriers, dropping cyber and kinetic weapons inside a FOB, possibly within the next 12 to 18 months, and we will have no response to it. We won't know who did it, we won't know what happened. And I was in Kuwait in 2003, where we fragged one grenade rolled into a tent. The chaos that ensued ended up with a Patriot battery shooting down 2 friendly aircraft. That was one grenade. Imagine if 80 of them went off in a FOB. I think that's our concern.
So you feel that robotics and remote weapon systems like that may be a game changer coming up?
I think we're getting behind.
Thank you. Eleanor, what current technologies do you think are going to be made obsolete by the upcoming new technologies?
So I think just to tag on to what Kevin said about procurement, one of the things that is lagging greatly are the technologies that are being used, for example, the current software systems, ERPs. And I'm sure you at the Air Force are very familiar with the customized software systems that people are using and how you have to manually enter data into GFEBs, which is a huge time suck and also bad use of human resources. There's also certain defense systems which are using 2 separate systems to track assets. And this can sometimes, for updates to reach the final destination, the final person who's going to be using them for critical parts, this can take months on end. So you really have kind of this gap about how are we seeing, my company deals with tracking of physical and digital assets, so that's what we're interested in, but it really ultimately has a huge impact on protecting site security, because if you don't know what's there, where it's come from, are there backdoors, are there counterfeit parts, are there unapproved parts, and where did they come from? So I think that technologies that will become obsolete will be the current paper-based documentation of parts and using these kind of customized, patched-together software systems. I think there needs to be a new approach that really underlines interoperability, so so that you can get end-to-end visibility of supply chains and improve procurement procedures. So, for example, at the Air Force, they spent over $1 billion on a software system that never really delivered. So,
That's interesting. John, what strategies does or should industry and government use to keep up with changing technology?
Well, I think we all know that the technology is evolving much, much faster than our ability to integrate it and to procure it. So the major issue is, particularly on large-scale programs, is very long lead times just to get the program started, much less get the equipment and systems out to the field where they need to be. There's little opportunity now to learn from our mistakes. We learn from pain when we show up on the front page of the New York Times or the Washington Post. We should be learning incrementally as we move along so we continue to improve the process. We also have a challenge with measuring things. We don't, in many of our programs, it's very late in the game when we do the measurement and we know, wow, we didn't get what we expected out of this, and why didn't we? And it's too late in our current procurement process to go back and make these fixes quickly. So I want to talk about, very briefly, about a program I was involved in. It's now ancient history, it's in the 1990s, but it continues to go forward, and it was in the submarine force. It was taking 20 years to get new technology out there. We created a group, we called it Build, Test, Build. I think it is a perfect analogy for, that's not its formal name, but that's what we called it. We built systems very quickly. We had authority to make decisions very quickly. We tested it both in a laboratory, then we used modeling and simulation, the kind of work my company does right now. But we didn't just do it modeling and simulation once, we modeled it and we kept that process going through the entire life cycle of the program. So we could figure out why are we not getting what we expected to get and how do we make it better. Then we took it to sea on operational ships. We didn't just build it in a lab, take 10 years to go through the procurement program and get it on a ship. We put it on real missions. We took it to sea, we gathered the data from that, and then we went into the next build phase. So it's a continuous cycle of improvement, build, test, build, very much like agile software development, but it was for an entire program, hardware, software, systems, training, personnel, all of those types of things. We took the real world data, and when we talk about things like that, people will probably think, oh, you're talking about a 5-year program. The cycles were 18 months. So 18 months from concept to delivery to lesson learned into the next build cycle. We cut over a decade, some would say 2 decades, I'm not quite that optimistic about it, but we cut over a decade out of the cycle. We put much better systems in place, but this is transformational. The government has trouble doing this, and yet it was able to do it. This was not a small experimental program. It's well over a $100 million program, and it's still going on today. So I think those kinds of ideas, maybe not exactly that idea, but those kinds of ideas are needed to transform the way we do business to get technology out there quicker and to figure out what technology works, end of life it, fail early, just like the DARPA model. Think big, fail fast, and then find the thing that does work, let's get it out there and deploy it and measure its effectiveness.
Is the Navy still using that strategy today?
What's that?
Is the Navy still employing that strategy today?
It absolutely is. Every Virginia-class submarine has that system on board. So, and it's all commercial. The name of the program formally was ARCI, Acoustic Rapid COTS Insertion Program. And across the entire, so when we bought new hardware, we made sure that it wasn't so specialized that we couldn't adapt it. It was all bought so that we could rapidly adapt it over a period of 4 or 5 years, and then we already knew 5 years from now it's obsolete, have a program to replace the hardware and keep going.
So hardware was replaced, you said, about every 5 years?
Hardware is replaced about every 5 years. Software continuously changed, sensors continuously change. Processing units and things we could predict far enough in the future. We'd put more than enough on to start so it would have a 5-year lifetime, because today hardware doesn't have a 5-year lifetime, but you can put enough on board that you can budget for that time frame.
Thank you. Jackie, as technology improves and evolves, so does the threat of it being stolen and duplicated, some might say reverse engineered by adversaries, either political or industrial. How do you think we can control or stop that?
So I see like a common theme from the other people who have spoken here around agility and transparency and the ability to be able to innovate quickly and fail fast, as you said. And I think the same approach should definitely be taken in terms of security. I kind of approach this a little bit differently, so I'm going to talk about this from a resource allocation standpoint. Sure. And when you're looking at, say, best practices in commercial organizations and how that can be applied to the DoD and to the Air Force and other government organizations, one of the things to really start looking at, in my opinion, is creating more of a decentralized organization. And what I mean by that is that the largest security risks a lot of times come from inside, whether that's like leaks, or even just like employees not fully understanding best security practices and what they should follow. And when you have incredibly large organizations, it's difficult to keep up on that, make sure people properly understand, and then also make sure people feel like they're part of whatever they're building, so they have that kind of alliance and desire to move towards a common goal, right? And so if you can help de-bloat an organization and take away some of that, this is going to be controversial, take away some of that middle management and put more power into the people that are operationally doing this stuff on a daily basis, you're empowering them to own their information, to own the visibility, to be more transparent in the information, especially if they're also able to adopt things like supply chain management that utilizes the blockchain and the transparency there, processes that involve fast iteration of things where they fully understand what they're doing. You're going to naturally create an environment where people feel more ownership of the information that's being transferred, and thus cause a situation where there's going to be less possibility for leaks and a better understanding of where some of those internal vulnerabilities may be.
Thank you. One question for the group at large here. Folks, how do you see the new technologies changing the way the government does business with security providers? What are your thoughts on how the new technology is going to impact the way the government may do business with us?
Repeat the question.
So they had trouble hearing the question.
I couldn't hear your question.
I'm sorry, I'll repeat again. How do we see the way that the new technologies may change how the government does business with security providers?
So I'll take a first shot at that, in that, again, many of the services that need to be done, even hardware services, something that's evolving very, very quickly. If you go through the classic government procurement program where the government buys, designs, buys, and owns it, then they're stuck. And that's what they've got for the next 5 years or 10, until you go through a new cycle of design, buy, own. You could consider, and this has been done, I can't think of a specific program, but I have seen this, where a service provider has a set of objectives that they have to meet. In drone technology would be a good example of something rapidly evolving and rapidly changing. If you can define that set of standards, let commercial industry worry about how to refurbish this thing, how to maintain it, how to upgrade it, how to support it, how to document it, maybe even in some cases how to operate it. Not in a combat zone, but we use this stuff all the time in non-combat related operations. Now, the transformational part of the business operations could belong to a small business, which are very good at this, or you don't exist in 5 years. You have to be innovative, flexible, adaptive, all of those things, and they can own the problem. The government gets what it needs. The Air Force gets, in this case, a drone system that executes the mission, does what it needs to do, and yet it continues to evolve, be maintained, and supported. That's a different contracting mechanism, a different thought process, but you could adapt that to all kinds of things.
Sure.
To piggyback on, oh, did you want to go?
No, go ahead.
It's just quick. To piggyback on what you were saying, like when you have competition, it creates innovation. And if you are outsourcing to other providers to provide security or any other thing in terms of a vendor, you're creating a competitive marketplace, and that is automatically going to help products innovate more quickly, make sure that they're thinking properly, because if they don't want to lose a potential contract down the line, so they're going to be taking into consideration security, I think, more. And it's easy to get, not on purpose, but it's easy to get lazy when the organization as a whole is responsible for all the departments of innovation inside of it.
Sorry. So I was just going to make a quick mention of The Air Force recently launched for SBIR grants.
Sure.
So essentially call for tender for small businesses. And they innovated in that they created something called the 18.2 call, which included a pitch deck. Because one of the problems, and I speak as a small business, not having been part of government, is you get there to do the SBIR, and oh my word, you have the technical volume, the cost volume, the this, that, the other thing. And it's a huge amount of work to wrap your head around it. And so on a small business perspective, is it really worth the money and time, effort to put it in if you're only getting 50K or 75K out of it? And so I think it was quite interesting, the initiative that they did to create this new call, where it would include a pitch deck. So that, which is a lot easier and more kind of startup, small business friendly. And I think that kind of initiative would be also encouraging, innovation or more companies to want to approach government, because you're not having so many barriers of all these forms that you have to fill out.
Sure.
Sorry, I mean, I'm a big proponent of the SBI program, STTRs, and our company basically have thrived on them for years, but almost always as a sub, because even the primes for SBIRs are small business in name only, and they have to go through all the volumes, they have to comply with all the DFARs, and when you're 2 or 3 people deep, that's going to be an issue. And all you're trying to do is keep the company afloat, and you've got to write 60 pages. So I think the government needs to accept greater risk. I honestly believe they should withdraw from the R&D world, because it's moving too fast for government sciences, and that those money need to go into small businesses, DIUX, AFWorks, things like this, but they need to shed all of the weight that the government drags into these contracts. They can't stop it. It needs to have full E&O compliance, DCAA compliance. And for 2 or 3 people, companies, you're like, I'm going to have to Google that.
So what you're saying is that due to the rapid pace of advancing technology, we need to also streamline the procurement process to enable smaller, more nimble businesses to compete and
It needs
supply.
to be higher risk for the government.
Yeah. It's better for the economy too, because if you have more businesses participating in innovation for the government, whatever is not proprietary IP can then be applied to commercial products that can help streamline our economy. And so, why would we not want to do that?
I know the government is also, at least in some areas, considering moving towards a service provider model where, because the pace of technology is advancing so rapidly, they're not stuck with owning technology that becomes obsolete within a year or two, but they merely pay for the service. And the service provider, the risk for how to keep up pace with technology is pushed back on the provider. Now, that may increase, from a certain viewpoint, the cost of gaining that, but it eliminates the worry of obsolescence from the government's standpoint. So.
Great.
Well, with that, I think we have maybe 2 minutes if there's any questions from the audience, from the panel. Yes, sir.
Can you stand up?
Yeah, come on, thanks.
Thank you. Thanks. I'm not trying to be intimate. As far as intellectual property is concerned, the standard has been that government purpose rights go to anything that's developed under SBIRs. As far as the company is concerned, that's a bit of a downside, especially if they're thinking of transferring their technology to a prime contractor. My understanding of this 18.2, and I'm just learning a little bit about it, is that it's mainly designed for commercial, off-the-shelf type product delivery. I'd just be a little curious if any of you know how that would work as far as government purpose rights is concerned.
May I call to the floor Steve Lauer, the expert?
This works. Test. Works a little bit better. So thank you for the call out on the new SBIR program. The application is actually closed today, and I'm just one member of that team that's a minor contributing member. The government purpose rights, I think, are negotiated each time, right? So it can be different. I think there's a willingness to be more flexible in the way we approach that. I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all solution in that case. But what I will say is one of the major differences in the way that we're approaching this new special SBIR topic is an emphasis first and foremost on the commercial viability of a company, because we don't want to invest in a technology that's going to be dead 2, 3, 5 years from now. So that's the first criteria. The second and third are the operational utility. So this is occurring during the phase 1, right? So you've determined that there's some baseline interest from the government and that we think that the company is going to be viable. During that 3 or so months that you're delivering the phase 1, you're performing customer discovery with as many potential customers in the government as you can, with the goal of determining if there is an interest, if there is a pull from the operational community, which is that second criteria. And the third is the technical feasibility, which we have folks from the labs who give a good perspective on that. So I know that we're almost out of time here, but I'd love to chat more offline with folks on the panel about what are those big problems with SBIR and other similar programs that we can remove those barriers for you. So good question, and thanks for all you're doing.
He broke it.
I think that concludes the time we have for our panel today.
You're all a
Thank
lot
you to
smarter
our
than I
panel
look, you know
members,
that,
and
so.
all of us will be free for questions as we mingle in the crowd here after this. Thank you.
You know. Yay!